Thank you, Mo. I don't call him Terrence. I call him Mo. That's how, first time I met him, I didn't know his real name for the first 6 months. And love Terrence, love Malia. This wonderful Christian family. I know you and Crossroads and here in the surrounding Walker County area. I'm going to step back because I don't like people being behind me. Is that okay with y'all? Okay. I mean, so at Double Springs one time, I was all the way against the Lord's Supper table. I couldn't go any farther back. But I love Terrence and Malia. They're great folks, and I know they're blessing your lives here at the Crossroads Church and surrounding Walker County area. I love that song, He Done Done. We can't really take credit for it at Double Springs. I learned it at Maywood. A guy named Russell Smith from Dennis in Tupelo, and I preaches up around Columbia, Tennessee. I heard him do that song and brought it to Double Springs. The kids will let you do that song as long as you will let them, okay? And it's fun. VBS is fun. Ours is not until July at Double Springs, and we're full steam ahead working on it. I know you're having a great week this week. It is cardio doing fun songs. You got all these watches that track everything you do. It's reported to somebody. I don't know who, anyway, you look at them, they'll show you're exercising, and you're just up there doing Father Abraham. So, if you have your Bibles, turn to Daniel chapter 6. That's where we're going to be tonight in our Bible study. I've approached this more like a Bible class than I have a sermon. So if you want to chime in, you want to read some and comment some, feel free to do so. I have to admit, there are chapters in the Bible and even verses in the Bible that I don't study in detail very often because you think you know them. Daniel chapter 6 is one of those chapters. If I ask you, when was the first time you heard or read the story of Daniel and the lion's den? What about you? VBS. I was, an infant probably. I don't know. Yeah, Vacation Bible School. I think back to the earliest Bible classes I can remember. I grew up mostly in the church at Winfield, but before then we attended the Guin Church of Christ and a lady named Rebecca Rayburn. Some of you know Bill Rayburn. Bill does mission work. And his sweet wife, Rebecca, she had a flannel board, and it was a big green flannel board. When I'm teaching teenagers, I have to go, flannel board's kind of like PowerPoint screen, but it's this little thing that kind of explain to them. But you remember flannel boards, right? She would have a flannel board, and whatever we were talking about, she would have that characters. We studied Daniel and David and all the heroes of faith. And I guess that's the first time I can remember studying about these great people in the Bible. I don't know about you. Daniel in the lion's den. Daniel in the lion's den is one of those stories that even people who are only peripherally familiar with the Bible, they know. It's kind of like David and Goliath. And so when I studied this, I spent a lot of time with it. I did that as a challenge because, well, to be honest with you, I don't know the last time I sat down and just really studied this chapter of the Bible because of its familiarity. And there were some things that I learned that I didn't even know, and I thought I knew the story pretty well. And so for us, as we think about Daniel chapter 6, you have to tell me if it's coming on up behind me. I don't know if Terrence says you want to put the screen going to come on? Are they going to come on? If they don't worry about it. Okay. There we go. Daniel chapter 6 is more than a children's story. If I had to summarize in one concept what Daniel chapter 6 is about, it's compromise. What will I do when my faith is challenged? Will I compromise? In this story, I don't like to call them stories. When I'm teaching either kids or adults, I like to call them historical accounts because the idea of a story almost makes it seem like what? Make-believe, don't it? So I've tried to do a better job with that in the last little bit. In the historical account that is Daniel, it is one of a series of stories that ask the question, will you compromise? You see, this story is about a time when Daniel and his friends are taken into Babylonian captivity. beginning in about 605 BC, then in 597, and then in 586. We believe Daniel was in that first group, in that 605 group, that was taken to a land far, far away from anything familiar, and there they are expected to serve the Lord. Jeremiah told them to do that, right? You know, everybody knows Jeremiah 29, verse 11. For the plans that I have for you, says the Lord, of a future and a hope. Have you ever read the context? It's contemporary with the time of Daniel, or at least shortly there before, some 70 years before. Have you ever read the context of that? You know, Terrence, what's the context of that? Yeah, you're going to go to this place, and God's going to take you through because of captivity. He's going to take you far, far away in a foreign land, away from Jerusalem. The temple is destroyed, and you go there and you serve God. It's easy to serve God in a comfort zone. It is difficult to serve God when you face challenges, no matter what those may be. So before we get into Daniel chapter 6, let's begin in Daniel chapter 1 and see this continued story. So this is going to be something that's instrumental when we get to Daniel chapter 6 and verse 10. Okay, this story of faithfulness and strength does not begin in Daniel chapter 6. You'll begin reading with it here in Daniel chapter 1. Look at who the young men are, where they are, and why they are there. Okay, so let's begin in Daniel chapter 1 and verse 3. Okay, let's begin reading together. Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, this chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility, youths without blemish, of good appearance, skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge and understanding and learning, competent to stand in the king's palace. And notice why they are there. Here's the why. There's the who. We would say, in modern terms, these are dynamic young people, okay? These are the lads, the leaders' kids. These are the kids that go to Maywood Christian Camp. I just come back from Maywood Christian Camp, getting ready to go again next week. Some of you go to Indian Creek Youth Camp. These are the kids that you know, when you do awards night at ICYC, your leadership awards kids, that's who you're talking about. We believe Daniel and his friends to be somewhere around 15, 16 years old during the time of this text. Okay? Let's continue reading here. What are they there to do? We've got the who. Let's see what they are there to do. Let's begin reading here in the middle part of verse 4. To teach them the literature and the language of the Chaldeans. In other words, they want these young people. If you want to make a difference or change a way of thinking about something, do you start with the older people? Who do you start with? You start with young people. When these things right here were first marketed, they weren't marketed to adults. Although my wife did buy one, they're one of the original, and she come home and she said, I paid $275 for a phone. I about had a stroke. I was like, are you kidding me? I thought, that's so expensive. And now I don't know how much these things cost. We didn't want to think about it. But when these things were made, right, this is something that's changed our world, okay? When these things first came out, they didn't market these to older people, did they? Who were the first people you saw with these? Teenagers, kids, young adults. Why'd they do that? Sorry? Knew how to work them. I didn't. I was young. I was 21, 22 years old. Tiffany brought that home, and I got the screen all big, and I was like, I don't know how to do this. And then you couldn't Google stuff then. I was like, I don't know. We have to take it back and have a look at it, whatever. You know how to work them? They understood the people that are going to buy these are who. So they changed. Would you agree with that marketing strategy? They changed our culture. Oh, 100%. When you want to start to make change, you start with youths, competent youths, and you start teaching them Chaldean culture so that they sympathize with Chaldean culture, and you teach them to assimilate into that culture so that when they do go back to Jerusalem, they are in favor of who? The Chaldeans. And here come these young men, Daniel, Hananiah, Azariah. Can you get the last one there? Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. We know them as Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There are some young men in this story that eventually is going to get to Daniel chapter 6, when Daniel's, we believe, to be an aged man. Some suggest 80, 85 years old. They start here and they are challenged time and again. What will they do in a foreign land when biblical principles are asked to be compromised? And that's in this story, as you think about who perhaps even the original audience is, you think about how powerful that was, that message, that example. Then you get to Daniel chapter 7. Not many VBSs are written from Daniel 7 to Daniel 12 because, well, it would be weird. Okay, I'll be honest with you. It would be strange. If you like apocalyptic literature, read Daniel chapter 7 through 12. Okay. But my point is, think about the message originally it had to people who were walking through that. Does that make sense? So we see this first compromise, Daniel chapter 1, verse 8. Here's some food. It's from the king's table. What are you going to do? And what did Daniel do in Daniel chapter 1, verse 8? He purposed in his heart, the New King James says, the ESV says, he resolved that he would not defile himself. And so by the time you get to Daniel chapter 6, what you have in Daniel's life, and also Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we'll look at that verse in just a minute, Daniel 3, you have a foundation as a young person that developed to mature faith in Daniel chapter 6, okay? So when it came to, am I going to pray, am I not going to pray, that was a no-brainer decision. I love working with families. I love working with kids. As I'm getting a little older, I approach things a lot differently than I did when I was 22, now that I'm 42. And I would say that one consistent thing I noticed, that foundation in those formative years, it's invaluable. I can't stress it enough. I mean, yeah, I understand some people, I used to hear this statistic a lot, and I'm tasting a little bit of rabbit here, but it'll come back to the list. I used to hear this statistic a lot, and it's positively false. I mean, you used to hear we lose 80% of our young people. You ever heard that? I used to hear that a lot. That's false. Absolutely false. If we lost 80% of our young people, we would have died out a long time ago. Okay. The latest study shows that we retain about 56% right out of high school. And then approximately 10, 15% of them will come back in adulthood. And so when it comes to faithfulness, not always bad news. Because one thing I notice about young people in the church, they know the Bible. Even now, they know the Bible. Much better than their religious friends. And so what you see here in Daniel, let's bring it back to Daniel. There was a foundation in these young men's lives that manifests itself time and again. What will you do when faith is challenged? When I teach and I preach, I like to give one point. I like one thing. And so we'll make application of this one thing. And here it is. An unwavering, uncompromising faith evangelizes the world and glorifies God. Now let's go to Daniel chapter 6. And I want you to see this principle borne out in the text as you see a pagan king who learns something and comes to some measure of understanding about God, because now you've gone from 15, 16-year-old Daniel to 80, 85-year-old Daniel. He's still making those same kind of decisions. Those of you who are older, I'll let you determine whether you fit into that demographic or not. Because I want to be invited back to the Crossroads Church of Christ. No, in all seriousness, never underestimate the power of your example. Marcus and Johnny Wires mean a lot to me and mean a lot of folks. I see some folks sitting in this audience. That's my wife's grandfather and grandmother. When I first got into ministry, I was over my head a couple of times, and I'd go sit down with Marcus for a cup of coffee. I'd just pick his brain a little bit and say, what would you do in this situation? My grandfather preached the gospel for over 50 years. Small town of Bankston, Alabama. Some of you know what Bankston is. I would ask him a question. You are making an impact in ways that you cannot even imagine if you are continuing applying that principle. Because here we are studying about a man that's in that stage of life. And by the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, we're still learning foundation of faith for us today. And so as we think about this principle, let's see it illustrated and applied so that we can apply it here in 2026, okay? The first thing we notice here in this text, faithfulness produces an excellent spirit. Let's begin here, Daniel chapter 6. Let's look at verses 1 through 5 together. Daniel chapter 5, the writing of the on the wall with the hand there. Daniel interprets it for Belshazzar. That's Nebuchadnezzar's son. His father learned humility. Belshazzar didn't. The kingdom is taken away from him. In verse 31 of chapter 5, it says, Darius the Mede receives the kingdom being about 62 years old. Verse 1, it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps, which is a governor type role, to be throughout the whole kingdom. And over them 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was one, of whom the governors would give an account, so that the king might suffer no loss. That phrase, might not suffer no loss. What do you think he's guarding against in that particular phrase? New governor, new king, new ruler, new way of doing things. What type of people do you want in charge of things, shall we say, taxes, revenue, tribute, decisions that need to be made that affect an empire at the time of which would not be rivaled until Alexander the Great, who had a larger empire? Okay? What kind of people do you want in charge of that? Honest? Yeah. Might not suffer any loss, right? He doesn't want to lose anything that might be of gain to this king. He doesn't want to lose it. And so he sets some people, but notice specifically who he isolates in verse 3, who he wants in charge. Not only you have the group, then you have the 3, but who's going to be second in command, if you will, to only King Darius. Let's read verse 3. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other presidents and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him. I looked up that word excellent, and it refers to someone who is preeminent or surpassing in some quality. And Daniel, the excellent spirit that he's surpassing in, is one of faithfulness and integrity. Okay? When you're dealing with some type of person, whether it be buying something from somebody, or maybe you're dealing with some type of official capacity, you want to deal with somebody that's honest, right? So here's Daniel. There's a reason he's being chosen, is because he has this preeminent, surpassing quality. He didn't want untrustworthy people running his kingdom. He wanted people like Daniel. And notice, at least in the ESV, it says, and the king planned to set him over where? What does your Bible say? The whole realm, the whole kingdom. A very large kingdom. And so we see in this situation that faithfulness produces an excellent spirit. When his enemies sought charges against the prophet, they didn't have any. He was faithful, he was consistent, he was honest, and he was competent. He knew what he was doing. And so as we think about an application here, Let's continue reading. Look at verses 4 and 5 with me. Then the presidents and the governors sought to find ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom. But they could find no ground or complaint or any fault, because he was faithful, no error or fault was found in him. And these men said, we shall not find any ground or complaint against this Daniel unless they find it where? He's a Bible man. I remember a few years ago when Roger Hubbard passed away. I remember going to Roger's funeral. I can't remember if it was Vance or Dale, one or the other. I think it was Dale that said about Roger. And if you knew him, preached at Curry for a long time, preached at Brock, for several years. And I remember what they said about him. That Roger was a Bible man. And if you knew him, you knew that to be true. He was a Bible man. What a great reputation to have. And say, that man right there, he follows the Bible. That's how we would say it in common terms. He was a man of integrity. For us, when it comes to consistency, a godly reputation, that comes from years of consistent, faithful living. And consistency requires effort to seek God's instruction. Let's make application. So let's step away from Daniel chapter 6 just a minute. I want you to go with me to Proverbs chapter 2. I want you to notice some verbs here that shows the effort that you and I need to take when it comes to consistency. I play golf about once every 5 years. I don't play very often. I used to play all the time. Then I had kids. And that stopped that. I do like to deer hunt. I hunt over Marcus and Johnny's place, Bartley's place. I hunt over there quite a bit. And one thing I tell Blake all the time, my older son, he's pretty good at it. He's killed quite a few good deer in his life. I tell him all the time, you can't kill them if you ain't with them. Let's go. I tell him that all the time. You got to get out there. I took my son, Ben. Ben is a sports kid. He will play anything with a ball. Blake, my older son, he goes to what's called Horizons at Free Hardman. And it was just Ben and me for the week. I said, we'll go play golf. And we went to Deer Run over in Moulton. I used to play there all the time. About 3 holes in, you know what Ben told me? He was about 4 or 5 years old. He said, Daddy, you are not very good at this. I said, you are correct, son. As we were walking through the woods looking for a ball. You're correct. Well, that's what happens when you play golf about once every 5 years. You see, consistency and doing things God's way brings about faithfulness and strength. Look at Proverbs chapter 2. I want you to notice some verbs here in this text. And look at also the word if. The word if in the Bible is a big word. Okay, it's a big word. Let's read together. My son, if you receive my words and treasure up my commandments, making your ear attentive to wisdom, inclining your heart to understanding, if you call out for insight and raise your voice for understanding, if you seek it like silver and search for it as hidden treasures. I underlined those in my Bible. Look at all those verbs. What type of verbs? Those are strong action verbs. I'm going to call out for something, I understand my need for it. And if I'm going to search and seek for something, that's going to take intensive effort. But look at the benefit, the blessing. Look at verse 5. You got all the if, verse 5, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. Consistency takes effort. It takes getting up, putting your feet on the floor and saying, Lord, I'm going to need your help today, but I'm going to serve you. What it takes. Seeking, searching. But also notice the second part of this, and we're not going to read all 9 verses. Godly integrity provides protection. Protection, the O key on my MacBook sticks, and I'm too cheap to buy a new one. That's why that's misspelled. I do Words of Truth for 6th Avenue, and I was reading an article today, and I missed about 4 O's in that article. I was glad. I wasn't going to read over it. I was like, the article's fine. I was going to be, it's be all right. And I got to read through it, and I was like, oh, no. But when it comes to godly protection, notice some of these things. Begin verse 6. The Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity, guarding the paths of justice, watching over the way of his saints. Then you will understand righteousness and justice and equity and every good path. And notice what he says. Look, verse 11. Discretion will watch over you. Understanding will guard you. And we see this illustrated time and again in Daniel's life in this first point, that faithfulness produces an excellent spirit. Let's go back to Daniel chapter 6, and let's notice the second principle here. Most of the time when we study Daniel 6, it's often a lesson about prayer, and rightfully so. But as we look at the text and see it, break it down, there's so many other things that's in this chapter that, frankly, until I studied for this, Terrence, I missed them. Number two, we think about this together. Faithfulness invites opposition from the evil one. When you make a decision to live for the Lord, there is someone who's going to do everything in his power and use every resource he has to stop. Okay, let's pick up Daniel chapter 6. Let's look at verses 6 through 9 together. Then the presidents and the governors came by agreement to the king Darius and said, O King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, and those agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, you, O king, shall cast into the lion's den. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Verse 9, therefore King Darius signed the document and the injunction. One commentator said this, it said, flattery is not communication, flattery is manipulation. O king, live forever. It's interesting that Daniel says the same thing in just a minute when he calls out and says, are you there? And he says, O king, live forever. In this situation, these men, in their jealousy and their envy, they want to do everything in their power to stop this man of God. And in doing so, I did a little more research. I thought, what exactly is this injunction? And this is what one person said. It said, Darius is not necessarily making himself out to be God, but to be the only mediator among the gods. If you control people's religion, what can you control? The people. If you can control the religion, you can control the people. And here, everything now runs through whom? King Darius. And so here he is, he goes, that's a good idea. I think I'll make myself the center of everyone's life. For 30 days, I'll do this. And if it's going to be something religious, it's got to come through me. Now, he's going to realize their trickery in just a little bit. We'll see that in about verse 14. But we see this, that faithfulness invites opposition from the evil one. Those who live for the Lord must not be surprised when opposition comes. Just a few texts that remind us this from the New Testament. Jesus talking to the apostles here and preparing them for his imminent departure. That's what he said. If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. What about 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 12? Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. Let's keep reading. 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 12. Indeed, all who desire to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. One thing I love about going to camp is these things don't work. there is no cell phone service. Indian Creek's probably the same way if I had to guess. We do have Wi-Fi. We do not give it to the kids because they won't go outside. I did have Wi-Fi a little bit. I got home Saturday afternoon, and Tiffany was telling me this story that's apparently went viral about this couple that aborted a Down syndrome baby. Has everybody heard about this? It's been everywhere. As the father of a special needs child, my instant response was sadness, because there are some assumptions there that child is missing out. You come to my house and you meet Afton's happy as she can be. Man, if she's got cocoa melon, some cheese puffs, and some apple juice, she's good. The other day I said, Afton loves to go. All right, she just loves it. And when we've been out for summer, I'm a school teacher. We're at home. I said, Afton, you want to go? Well, she jumped up out of that recliner and she come there. I was taking her to exercise. She didn't know that. And we got in the van. We were right in the boy. I don't even remember where the boys are. And we pulled up at the track. And I pulled open that van door and she stood up. She saw the track. She went, wham! Just hit me upside the arm. I said, you're going to exercise, ma'am. We've got to walk. You can't sit in the house all day. And a little bit later, we're driving home. She tapped me on the shoulder, and I went to Jack's and got her some chicken nuggets. So it was all right. So, but I heard that story because there's so many experiences like that they're going to miss out on. I wish I could tell you what it's like, but it's just amazing. It's an amazing experience. There are difficulties, no doubt. So Tiffany was telling me about this story, and she goes, "Did that make you mad?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, but I'm not surprised." Whenever I hear something like that coming out of the world, we shouldn't be surprised. When I hear about Christians enduring difficulty in a difficult place, I'm not surprised. Why am I not surprised? What did 1 Peter 4:12? Do not be what? Surprised. When I read the story of Daniel, and here's this man trying to be a godly influence in his world around him, I am not surprised that there were people trying to stop him. Because what does Satan do? What does he do? Man, he does everything he possibly can do to stop you. People, influences, money, you name it, he tries it. And that's what he's there to do, because he's our adversary. And here, Daniel, faithfulness, we were reminded that faithfulness invites opposition. And we should not be surprised when that happens. Number 3, we have to remember, the cost of compromise is too great to pay. Let's read Daniel chapter 6 and verse 10, and notice what it says. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house, where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day, and he prayed and gave thanks before his God. The ESV says, as he had done previously. What does your Bible say? As was his custom. If something's your custom, what is that? What you do. My custom every morning is to drink a cup of coffee first thing. I drive a school bus. I'm up early, just the way I'm wired, I guess, after you do that for a number of years. You get up early, and now that I'm not in school, first thing I'm going to do is get a cup of coffee. That's what I do. Anybody else do that? First thing you do in the morning. You have a custom, something you do every day. What did Daniel do every day? He prayed. When it comes to praying toward Jerusalem, you want to see where that comes from. This idea begins. If you leave your ribbon marker here, let's go to 1 Kings chapter 8. I want you to notice something Solomon says here in 1 Kings chapter 8. He says it 4 times in this chapter. Verse 35, verse 38, verse 44, and verse 48, something similar. But 1 Kings chapter 8, let's begin here at verse 35. And this prayer of dedication. Verse 35 says, when heaven is shut up and there is no rain because they have sinned against you, if they pray toward this place, that's the temple, if they pray toward this place and acknowledge your name and turn from their sin and the afflictive, verse 36, you'll hear them and grant rain. If you look at verse 38, you see something similar. Whatever prayer whatever plea is made by any man by your affliction of people, knowing each the affliction of his heart, stretching his house toward this house. Okay, look at verse 44 of this same chapter. If your people go out to battle against their enemy, by whatever way you shall send them, and they pray to the Lord toward this city. Okay, look at verse 48. Verse 48. If they repent with all their mind and with all their heart in the land of their enemies who carried captive, that's our situation, they're carried captive, and pray to you toward their land. And so if you look historically, if you take the Old Testament text written about this time, some of the captives have started going back under the leadership of a man named Zerubbabel. Okay, and so there's Daniel, aged, remaining in captivity, while some Israelites are going back, and then you have Ezra laying the foundation of the temple, Nehemiah going back and rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. So it's starting that process. Okay, and so here's Daniel. He's staying back, and he looks toward Jerusalem, as Solomon said they would, and he offers this prayer, as was his custom. Courage in the moment is developed by years of faithfulness and faithful decisions. If you look here in the text, I read this, I thought this was pretty good. Faithfulness before a crisis gives strength to be faithful during the crisis. Maybe I can get it changed here. There we go. I love that statement. Right, when it comes to us and making hard decisions, when we're engaging in difficulty, the faithfulness that before that will strengthen us when it's faithfulness in a difficult situation. There's several texts to think about. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12. We do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against rulers, against authorities, against cosmic powers over this present darkness, against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. That's verse 12. What does that cause us to do? Look at verse 13. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, having done all to stand firm. I love Colossians chapter 1, verse 11. But being strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, for all endurance and patience with joy. For us, we have to remember, what is the cost of compromise? For Daniel, think about that just a minute. Let's say the story goes differently. It doesn't, thankfully. Let's just say for our purposes. The story of Daniel ends in this situation. He gives in. And he chooses not to pray, and he chooses to listen to what the king says. Are we having a much different lesson? Yeah, of course. Compromise has a great cost. We need to remember that. Also, a healthy prayer life requires consistency. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 17, pray without what? You can finish it. Ceasing. Have a life that is characterized by prayer. Colossians chapter 4 and verse 2, continue steadfastly in prayer, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. Two more points of applications we think about our principle. Number 4, faithfulness trusts God with the outcome. Daniel's detractor, they were laying in wait. We know this in Daniel chapter 6. We see them almost as if they were looking around the corner, if you read the text that way. But they were paying attention. That's what we do know. And of course, they go straight to the king. And look at verse 14. The king realized something. It says, when the king heard these words, what was his emotional response? What's the text say? Very displeased. ESV says distressed. He realized all of this situation was what? A ruse. He gets it. Remember, flattery is not communication. Flattery is manipulation. He looks at the situation. He says, this is not good. And if you keep reading, what did the king try to do? If you keep reading, what did he try to do? He tried to change the law. He had till sundown to figure it out. And so if you look in this situation, It said he went, if you read a little bit later, when he actually puts Daniel in the lion's den, look at his emotional state. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting, and no diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. I heard one preacher say one time, he said, Daniel slept like a baby in the lion's den, and the king stayed up all night in the palace, worried about his friend, somebody who was going to put in charge of his whole palace. Of course, he wasn't able to change the law. Daniel did go into the lion's den. But Daniel's faith was not, God will save me. Daniel's faith was, I will serve God no matter what. Was Daniel going to serve God whether those lions did or did not attack him? Well, you better believe it. His friends were like that too. Remember Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? I think if I go back one right here. If we go back to, let's go look at Daniel chapter 3, verses 16 and 18, 16 and 17. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king and said, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If it be so, our God we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace and will deliver us out of your hand, O king. They had the same attitude. In this book, you see that example time and again. What about the example of Esther? Esther chapter 4 and verse 16. Go and gather all the Jews found in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, as I and my young women will also fast as you do. And then I will go to the king, though it's against the law. And I love that last phrase. If I would, I would. If I perish, I perish. You see, their attitude wasn't God will save me. Their attitude was, I will serve God no matter what. Okay? One more example here. Acts chapter 5 and verse 29. Don't you go preach. Verse chapter 4, we can't help but preach about what we've seen and heard. They shake their finger at them again, this time a little more serious. Don't do that. And what'd they say? We must obey God rather than men. Not that God will save me from a difficult situation. Now, we're not talking about saving from sin, of course, talking about out of the situation. But it is, I will serve God no matter what. There's a song that's becoming quite popular now, especially if you go to anything with young people. One of the phrases is, when you call me out upon the waters and you pass through the waters. I love that song. If you've heard it, you may know what I'm talking about. That comes from Isaiah chapter 43 and verses 2 and 3. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. Through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. And when you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned. The flame will not consume you. For I am the Lord, your God. For us, we've got to have that same attitude. No matter what the situation is, I want to serve God. Number 5, faithfulness seeks to glorify God no matter the situation and above all. Let's end the chapter here, Daniel chapter 6. Let's look at verses 24 through 28. Of course, verse 24 talks about his accusers and their families. They're thrown in the lion's den, and they and their children. They said before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bone into pieces. And if you look here in verses 24 and following, 25 and following, notice what this pagan king does. This pagan king glorifies God. Begin reading in verse 26. I make a decree that in all of my royal dominion, people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. Notice this. For he is a living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed. His dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven, on earth. And he who saved Daniel from the power of the lions. We don't know just a lot about this king. But would you describe him, at least initially, as a God-fearing man? Probably not. He's a Mede and a Persian. That makes him a pagan. And after this whole experience with the lion's den, staying up all night, and the trickery and everything that goes on, the chapter ends with this man glorifying God. So let's go back to our principle. An unwavering, uncompromising faith evangelizes the world, and glorifies God. The story ends with a man who has some measure of understanding of who? Not Daniel, but who? God. Because an aged man made a decision to serve God. Now, what we do points to God. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 12, keep your conduct honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation. Oh, I went back one. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 12, look at verse 15. For this is the will of God. That's an interesting series. I'm planning to preach at Double Springs this year. That phrase, this is the will of God, and to see that mentioned throughout the New Testament. You got Matthew chapter 7, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. You got here 1 Peter chapter 2. For this is the will of God, that by doing good, what will you do? You will silence those who are ignorant, the ignorance of foolish people. This next passage, when you think about this principle, it's one that's special to me. When I was about, I don't know, maybe 11 or 12 years old, the man who would eventually become my father-in-law was my Bible class teacher. That's Tiffany's daddy. Tiffany's daddy is 6'6", about, I don't know, 300 pounds. When you're 12 years old, he looks like Goliath. And that's your Sunday school teacher. And I remember him walking in and said, before this class is over, you're going to know all of Psalm chapter 1, and you're going to know all of 1 Peter 3:15. What do you think we did before that class was over? We learned all of it. And I'm not going to try it right now, but I probably still quote Psalm chapter 1 just because of that class. What do? We give an answer. Why do we give an answer? Look at verse 16. We give an answer because having a good conscience, so when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior may be put to shame. We point to God. That's the point he was trying to get to us. One of the 3 times the word Christian is used in the New Testament, 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 16. If anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in that name. Daniel chapter 6. We know about the prayer. When was the last time we focused on the meaning of the decision? And this particular decision was a series of decisions that he and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they made time and again. And here we are in 2026. We are still learning from their example. Did you say you wanted an invitation? You got an invitation song? 675. I am resolved. That's a great invitation song, Terrence. It's like you planned that. Good job, my man. I am resolved. Daniel was resolved. Are you resolved this evening? Now, I know we're talking to a Monday night vacation Bible school crowd. I know you folks are the faithful, the faithful. I know that. But you may have come to this assembly with something on your heart and mind. And the beauty about being a part of God's people is that you're surrounded, no matter where you are, by people that love you and want good things for you. And most importantly, we want to see each other go to heaven. That matters more than anything. And you may have a need this evening. It may have positively nothing to do with anything we've studied this evening. Maybe something that you've been thinking about. And maybe somebody who is not a Christian. And you've got to have that same type of resolve, that same type of faith. It starts there, and it culminates by walking through God's plan of salvation, and then finally being baptized into Christ. Maybe that's your need this evening. Somebody may have been studying with you. I can think of no better than June 8th at 8:07 p.m. Terrence, we'll put off snacks, won't we, to make that happen? And I guarantee you they would. That might be your need this evening. I don't know what it may be. But if you have a need, the Lord's invitation is extended to you now as we stand. Come and behold in the one and the only, cry out, sing,